So this is the next blog that you're supposed to write. And just to reiterate what I just said 2 seconds ago, is that the project is slightly changed. I wrote the project and presented it to you, at the beginning of September. And because of the pandemic, things have changed, and I've adapted a lot of parts of this course as well as this assignment to the specific conditions that we have presently. So here's the idea of the project, is that you are going to write a blog about one of two things. So number one, it could be about some kind of a gardening guidebook. And before I was saying designing a garden, that could be part of it still if that's what you're looking to do, but I've actually branched out and made it a little bit more broad. So instead of just writing a book about designing a garden, my intention at the beginning is that we could actually all do this together and be part of some kind of a location, and then design some kind of a either permaculture garden or whatever it is, and then you go back and write about it. But considering we can't do that, I'm actually allowing a little bit more broad ideas to actually take place within this blog. So number one, gardening guidebook means basically you're going to be writing about either setting up a garden, designing a garden. And I'm saying garden, it could be an urban farm or whatever we want to define that as, something of scale at least, and not just a couple of tomato plants. Anyhow, so setting up a garden, designing a garden, planting schedules, irrigation techniques, soil building, pest management. These things could go into designing a guidebook. So kind of the idea about this is that I know in Montreal, there's a bunch of different Facebook sites and different groups and things available. A lot of people are struggling to set up their gardens and don't know what to do if this is the first time they're doing this. And to the extent as this year, I noticed actually an increase in people asking for this kind of information. So it could be really interesting to actually write our blogs on this. And if people want to publish this in the bigger picture later on, I have that website that you can publish this on, or you could just even circulate this in gardening communities. And it could be a great resource for people that don't know where to get started. So gardening guidebook, you could choose one element, or you could look at more of integrative techniques of, if you're getting set up for the first time, what do you do? For very, very beginning gardening people, or, we're actually setting up a full-fledged urban farm, and what do we do about that? How do we actually get started? So, it could be anything from setup. It could be about designs also. You could look at, how to build either above ground infrastructures and have them kind of like we do at Kovic, where we actually winterize our gardens also, look at vertical gardening and different designs that are appropriate for urban settings. Planting schedules also. So there's been discussions, especially in the text that I had you read, about succession planting, but also, just about different things that can be grown in different areas, and intercropping, and doing spin farming. So, what kind of a planting schedule do we need when we're doing these kind of techniques? Other things that are interesting are irrigation techniques. A lot of people don't necessarily have much time to spend on their gardens. So reduction of as much as possible of the work is actually beneficial for a lot of people that don't have the time. So there's irrigation techniques that, people actually will hook up things to, let's just say their, where their water comes out, their hoses and stuff like that. But there's other more permaculture-based techniques also that are about water capturing, and actually about, mulching or other things that actually keep water into your soil. So these techniques could be developed and turned into a blog. Soil building is really important in regenerative agriculture. So what kind of ways do we build soil? A lot of people in the gardening communities don't know much about this. And pest management, looking at different ways of managing different pests. So what kind of pests are around in Montreal, and how do we manage them to the best as possible? In this, I would expect that you're going to look at organic ways and not just kind of spraying pesticides and fertilizers all over your plants, but actually looking at more integrative pest management coming from organic methods. And there's a bunch of books that discuss this. Usually what you're doing is you're trying to attract things that are predators to the bugs that you're trying to get rid of, or, providing intercropping techniques that it makes it difficult for certain pests to go devour crops, in their entirety. I would say in Montreal, one of the biggest pests are squirrels and groundhogs, and good luck trying to deal with them. It's pretty difficult. But there are ways also. Usually it's just putting fences around things and making it so that the animals can't get in. But anyhow, so these are just ideas, but I could leave it up to you to decide what you want to do with this. I know some of these ideas are some of the things that you propose for your final project. So what I would expect is this: don't do your final project on exactly the same thing, but you could do it on things that are relatable. So you could talk about like soil building, and then maybe go further in your final project to actually look at kind of more comprehensive approaches to soil building or whatever the case is. Anyhow, the second aspect of this blog is writing a persuasive piece about the merits of getting involved in urban agriculture, either at home or as part of a collective. So kind of addressing some of the questions that were brought up, are people really integrated into their food systems? And if not, how do we convince them to do so? And there's a bunch of really compelling arguments that could be brought up. What I don't want this to be is kind of a cheerleading exercise where you don't address some of the concerns about urban agriculture or the limitations towards it. So for example, yes, we cannot grow coffee in Montreal in the methods that we have and the climate that we have, although people argue that maybe we could do this in greenhouses. Anyways, despite that debate, I would say that, we cannot say that urban agriculture is going to take care of our coffee needs. But there are different things that urban agriculture does really well, like localizing food and other things like that. So I would say that these approaches to persuasive arguments will be more compelling and rooted in more things that are, possible in local communities. So these are the two things that I'm asking you to do one of the two. So I've kind of left it open a little bit, but have one of these two things. So examples of structures, I've already went over this, but just to kind of look at it again. So this is just an example of a structure for a garden design. Now, if you do soil building or you do other things, there may be a different structure in play, but if you follow kind of these guidelines, it'll help you. So the best thing in a blog is to try to hook your readers into reading the piece. It's not necessary, but a good blog usually has a compelling argument or reason to read it, or some kind of a way to hook the readers. Clear presentation of the overall garden design, if that's what you're writing about. Be clear, concise, and specific about what you're trying to accomplish in your overall design. But if you're looking at irrigation or soil building, I would say you need some kind of a clear presentation of what you're trying to break down anyway. So break this down into smaller gardening structures and designs. So here, like I was thinking of a more holistic approach. You could talk about irrigation, types of plants, location of plants, soil amendments, composting. But if you're talking about one of these things specifically, you want to break it down into smaller components about what this really entails. If you're looking at, soil building, well, what kind of plants do you need to actually reproduce certain nutrients in your soil? And how do you actually compost it over time? What are the best methods of doing so? Explanations of the design. So explain the reasons for your choices of the design. So basically providing evidence for why you think this is the best approach. You could do so in the other kind of elements that are provided also in this paper. Point out potential flaws in your design. So look out for, no garden's perfect. What are things that people should look out for in your garden design? You could do this with soil building also. What are the different problems that you may occur in pest management? What are different issues that you may see in pest management that you need to deal with in the bigger picture? Conclusion, wrap it up, kind of link it back to the hook. Follow up, I say provide links and hashtags, but look, since these blogs are not, the primary concern is not about publication of them, I'm not going to be too picky on this follow-up here. If you don't provide any, it's not going to harm your bottom line of your grade, but it would be good in a blog if you do provide some, it makes it a lot more interesting. Anyhow, so that's the structure for the garden design and or the other things in number one. Number two is a little bit more direct here. What you need to do is provide some kind of a hook, get people interested in writing or reading your piece, support it with some kind of a claim. So you're kind of coming up with a general claim as to why urban agriculture is important and people should get involved. You want to support your claim by persuading your audience to accept the claim of some sort. And the best way to do it is through evidence. So bring in evidence to demonstrate why your claim is valid. I would say multiple evidence pieces is the best. So do some research and then provide this research as an evidence-based approach. Address any counterclaims. So like I was saying, it's not a cheerleading exercise. There are things that'll go against what your main claim is. But if you have a main claim, well, the other claim should not be better than your main claim. So you want to explain why your main claim is better than the other ones. Conclusion, wrap up, few short sentences that usually link to the hook. Hashtag, same thing. You don't need to provide them, but it would make your blog more interesting. And then when it comes to the grading, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a proper analysis of the subject matter. So do you actually understand what you're talking about? Clarity and structure. Are you actually providing proper claims and are you backing them up properly? And is your paper structured in a way that's conducive for the reader to actually understand what you're talking about? Sentence and grammar structure. This is not a heavily weighted item, but please just proofread your stuff so that I know what you're talking about And if grammar becomes an issue, sometimes it actually loses people in the structure and then doesn't become clear to people that are reading. The other thing is relevance of information. I need you to do a research report. So I want you to do proper research. It means going to gardening books and other resources that are credible resources, not just somebody's blog site on the internet that they've created because there's a pandemic and they've just discovered gardening for the first time and want to show the world the first time they've ever planted a tomato and try to teach people about it. I want you to actually go to proper resources. So go to books, go to articles, go to people that are specialized and or have published about this and or are part of research institutes that are actually looking at urban agriculture or gardening techniques or other things like that. University of Saskatchewan, McGill University, there's all these places that have published quite a bit about different things about gardening and urban agriculture and farming in Canada. So you could go access these resources. And then the other thing I put in is aesthetic form. It would be great to have photos, make it look like a blog, and have follow-up links and things like that. But this is not going to be weighted in your final grade. It's just more that it would make it interesting for me to read. But if you don't provide a nice visually appealing blog, it's not going to hurt you. So that is the blog description, and I see that there may be some questions. So Jeremy, I think you had the first question.
For the 10 sources, does that include class readings we could use?
It could include class readings, yes. So anything that I've provided to you or other things that you've discovered on your own, I want you to make sure that it's a well-researched blog and not just coming from conjecture, that people are actually taking the time to do proper research.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, any of the sources that I've provided from the class could count also. Questions, concerns, anybody else?
I just want to know, is it like the kind of the same word count as the first one? Because like at first I was just thinking of like building a like couche froide for my own garden and probably like making a blog on kind of how to build one, how to use it or stuff like that. But now I see that we need like 10 sources or stuff like that. So I'm a bit unsure if I should go in that direction or go in another direction, let's say.
Well, look, I'll tell you this, Sam, it's not hard to find resources, and especially like even 10 resources about building cold boxes.
Right.
So look, one of the resources or a couple of them could be about design techniques of cold boxes. Actually, some are in the book that I provided, The Essential Urban Farmer, actually have some ideas about that. But then other things too. So what are you growing in the cold boxes? And actually there's other resources to talk about cold plants and other things like that.
Okay.
There's some that talk about the depth temperatures of plants also. So, these things could be helpful. If you're growing broccoli, there's a whole bunch of different books that talk about how to grow broccoli properly. So this is where you're going to pull in your resources. You're going to do, literature searches on the things that you're growing, maybe in your cold box, and some maybe that has to do with design.
Right.
Maybe some to advocate why you should be doing this in the first place.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
So look, and not to scare you all, I did say 10 sources, and it probably seems like a lot. What I just want is I wanted a well-researched blog, not coming from conjecture. I want people to actually look up this information and provide it to others that, hopefully if we're going to share this, then that's great. But if not, pretend that you're sharing it with people, but provide an explanation that tells people how to do this properly. And a well-researched explanation and delves into the matter. You actually look at the difference between an A and a B here. I'm saying 5 sources for a B and 10 sources for an A. Now, that's just one component of my grading. So a lot of people focus on that as the only component of the grading. If you have, let's just say, 8 or so sources and everything else is in the A range, it's not going to affect your grade all that much. So, don't worry too much. That's one component. Make sure that your blog is well written and well researched, and that's what I'm looking for.